You are listening to Productivity Straight Talk with your host, Amber De La Garza. Amber is a sought-after productivity coach, trainer, speaker, and writer who gives entrepreneurs the straight talk on personal productivity. No BS, fluff, or overused jargon. Just actionable strategies to get results and succeed in business. And here is your host, Amber De La Garza, the Productivity Specialist.
Welcome, and thank you for listening to Productivity Straight Talk. Today is episode 303, Mastering the Hiring Process with Jamie Van Cuyk. If you're a business owner who wants to learn effective business strategies, improve time management, and elevate productivity to maximize profits, reduce stress, and make time for what matters most, then you're in the right place, and I'm so glad you've joined me. I'm looking forward to you meeting our guest, Jamie Van Cuyk, today because we are going to have an amazing conversation about mastering the hiring process. And if I know one thing for sure, I know that hiring can be quite challenging. And so I wanted to have this conversation to give you actionable strategies, tips, and resources to help you on your next hire. Jamie, the owner of Growing Your Team, is an expert in hiring and onboarding teams. Drawing from over 15 years of leadership experience, Jamie empowers women business owners to expand their businesses by teaching them how to master the hiring process. By providing bespoke hiring frameworks and comprehensive guidance, Jamie helps women entrepreneurs gain the confidence to hire like a pro. On the personal side, Jamie lives in Florida with her husband and 2 daughters, is a hobby winemaker, loves to travel, and enjoys exercise that takes her feet off the ground, including rock climbing and aerial dance. Inside today's episode, you will discover the biggest hiring challenges business owners face and what to do about it, why business owners often hesitate to hire, how long it takes to find a great hire on average, what types of open-ended questions you should be asking your candidates in your next job interviews, when it is and is not okay to compare candidates, why having 2 rounds of interviews is so important and, Jamie says, essential, what clients are looking for right now outside of salary right now in the job market, and so much more. Before we dive in, I would love to invite you to take my next level business owner quiz. Hit pause, head on over to amberdelagarza.com/quiz. Take a few moments to take this quiz, and I will share with you what your biggest challenge is currently to taking your business to the next level. And then I will send you a personalized, curated playlist of Productivity Straight Talk with specific episodes that will provide you with strategies and tips to overcome those challenges quickly. Head on over to amberdelagarza.com/quiz. And now let's meet our guest and get to the straight talk. Hi, welcome to Productivity Straight Talk. Jamie, how are you?
Hi, Amber. I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me today.
Absolutely. I was a guest on your podcast and I was like a few minutes into it. You and I hit it off and, growing your team is a hot topic in my world for productivity and business owners. And I knew you'd be a great guest so we could have a great conversation. So as I was preparing for our conversation today, it really struck me that you probably started your business for a real reason, to solve a real problem for business owners. And so, you can share any part of that story. Like, how did you even say, woke up one day and you're like, I'm going to start a business that helps people grow their teams? Like, what's your background? Why do I get to talk to you about this? And then we'll dive into the rest.
Yes. I'm more than happy to share the story, and I'll try to share the short version of the long story.
So, it's always a long story, I guess.
Right?
It never isn't, but go for it.
Yeah. Did I ever picture I'd be running this business? No. This business on itself was not my initial goal. I knew I always wanted to run a business, to be my own boss and everything, but it was like, what is it going to be? And oh gosh, feels like forever ago now, I left my corporate job where I was in the operations department, a manager in the operations department, to start a software development company with my husband. We're like, this is it. He's a programmer. Yeah, I have the leadership side. We're like, we'll marry our skills together and run this business. 6 months in, I hated it. I was miserable. And I was just like, I always wanted to be my own boss, but it's not worth being miserable over and having a business that I can't stand. Like, I love technology, being on that side of technology. Nope, not for me. So I was like, what do I do? And when I left my corporate company, I was lucky that they kept me on as a consultant for 6 months, helping with some projects that mostly centered around leadership development. It was helping some first-time managers really transition into their role, helping them learn some of the skills, helping them realize that things are a little different now that you're on this side of the table and you're leading people. And what does it mean to manage up? And what does all this stuff mean for you? How do you transition into this role? And I realized with that, I loved leadership development and training. I loved being a part of those conversations. I loved really helping people do something for the first time. And so I was like, okay, well, what do I do with this? How do I create a business around this? What are businesses really looking for? And I had a membership to one of our local chambers. So I was like, I'm going to go to the chamber meetings. I'm going to network with people, and I'm just going to go out information seeking. And I'm going to talk to people and find out what are their problems to see if I can take their problems and build packages around it that then I can go and market and pitch to corporate companies. And I kept finding myself speaking to small business owners. And when I'd say, okay, well, let me just ask what their problems are too. They're not corporate companies, but I'm going to ask and find out their needs, what their struggles were. Almost everybody mentions hiring.
Absolutely.
And like when they asked more about what I was doing, and I was like, well, leadership development and training, they're like, okay, well, can you teach me to be better at the hiring process? And initially I said, no, like my target audience is corporate companies. I'm trying to figure out how to go after those corporate clients, but I will find you somebody. I will find you somebody that can help you with this process. And I could find nobody. No one was helping small businesses with those very early hires. If I found companies that said they were helping small businesses with hiring, they referred to small businesses as 50 plus employees. Yes, technically those are still small businesses by the small business definition, but you can't get to 50 plus employees if you screw up on your first few hires. Like, hiring is such a critical step, and no one was really helping small businesses with this. So I decided, that's it. I am going to do it. I have the skills. So even though I didn't come from HR, I was involved in a lot of different hiring projects. I understood what it meant to have a good hire. I understood what it meant to hire for other people's teams, because I often help my peer managers hire for their teams. And so I had all these skills, and I said, let's do it. Let me help these businesses with where they really need this critical help. And now it's been over 5 years that I've been doing this, growing your team.
Talk about doing market research, and you nailed it. So I've been doing my business for 13 years, and I work exclusively with small business owners. And I could tell you, you're 100% right. This is a pain point. And I have found that it's such a pain point because, as small business owners, we're talking under 50. Well, I agree. You get into business usually because you're uniquely skilled at something, or you have a passion, or you created something specific. But the HR was not top of your list to wear that hat of like, okay, I need to understand the whole hiring process. And yet when we start as small businesses, it seems like it happens really quickly that we need help. And in the work that I do, I find that solopreneurs push that out far longer than they should, because it seems like such a daunting task. It seems like such a daunting project to make the hire. And I find that the idea that they're going to do it wrong freezes them into inaction.
Oh, 100%. It's like no one starts a small business because they want to manage people. They do it, like you said, because they have this skill set that they
Yeah.
want to monetize. And hiring is a product that comes from being successful at being really good at the skill or product you're going to put out there for other people. But it's a scary thing. If you think about when a lot of businesses start to cross that threshold to bring a team member on, whether it's an employee, even if it's a part-time employee or a contractor, typically you're still in that very overwhelmed stage because you're doing it all yourself, but also potentially in that stage where things aren't quite stable yet.
Mhm.
So you're still wondering, oh my gosh, is my business still going to be around in 6 months? Can I afford to pay myself, let alone afford to pay another person? So we kind of let a lot of these fears stop us because we're not yet seeing the long-term success that would make us go, this is going to stay in business. This is going to continue being successful. Next month, I'm not going to have to close my doors because we're always in that what could happen mindset.
Absolutely. So what are some of the common challenges with hiring that you find small business owners have? The hiring process, there's a lot of steps. Do they all get stuck on the first step? What is the most common places that you find business owners are challenged?
Yeah, the first place is, you need help, but you just know you need help. So you don't really take the time to figure out what type of help you actually need. A lot of times people will jump in and it's like, but I just need someone who will help me figure it out. Great.
Yes.
Figure what out? And if
no, like a magic pill, like they're going to come in and fix the things I haven't been able to fix in the business. Right? I get it. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's people you could hire to help you figure it out, but you also have to know that you're hiring them to help you figure it out. And then those projects are done and they go on their way. And now you have it figured out and you go and hire that person to help you sustain. Yeah. So, there are those things, people that will help you figure it out, but you have to be very clear. But it's not the same
hire they're thinking in their head. Yes.
That's typically a short term, possibly a contractor that's going to help you figure it out. So you have to really know what position you're hiring for, what tasks you're going to be delegating, and what your expectations for success are going to be. So that way you can really make sure you get the right person. And the right person is not just someone who can do these tasks well, but also who's going to fit into your organization, who's going to fit with your leadership style, who can deal with the chaos of small business. Because even small businesses that are really successful, there's still this level of kind of chaos is really a good word for it, because we can pivot next week if we need to. We can throw in this new product or service without having to take months or years to go through all these approvals and testing and all these things. So who's going to be able to fit into what you need at this stage of business? So a lot of people will say, I just need help. I just maybe need an assistant. And they're not very clear on even what that person's going to be doing for them other than just taking work off their plate.
Yeah. One of the things that I have experienced is that they want somebody to come in that is going to do what they're doing, meaning wear all the hats, right? Like I can just hire somebody, like they're going to wear all the hats and do all the things because, as you said, chaos or messy. Small businesses aren't like, generally at the beginning, like you're not hiring for this one specific specialty role and they stay in their lane. It's like, I need them to do this and this and this. And I always say, like, if they can do all those things, they're probably running their own business. Like, it's like one and the same with a personality, right? So How do you help the business owner determine where they could use the most amount of help? Like, how do you determine what that first hire is?
Yeah. So when we're working with businesses, or even sometimes when we coach businesses to do this work on their own, we always say, start with a list. Create a list of things that are not getting done in your business, but need to be getting done. Mm-hmm. Things that you hate doing, but you struggle through it and you're struggling through it to get it done. Things where you're like, oh my gosh, if there was 2 of me, we'd be able to like really crank these things out, which would bring my business to the next level. So start creating a list of those things where you could delegate to someone. You might not be willing to delegate yet, and we can talk about that in a minute, but you could delegate. Once again, I said in one example, it could be if there was a second of you. So it's someone you trust. And then once you create that list, you need to prioritize. And the way you prioritize is as, what is this going to do for my business to have someone other than me doing these tasks? And you're going to realize that some things aren't going to move the needle that much. Other things are going to move the needle significantly. And those items that are going to move the needle significantly, those are the areas you should focus on delegating first. And then you need to look at those tasks to say, is this one role or is it multiple roles? So as we just talked about, like that jack of all trades is normally not going to work out in your business. So you have to sometimes look to say, all right, maybe this is multiple roles because these tasks aren't really related. Yeah, as a business owner, I do it all, but the person I hire is not going to do it all. So do I hire 2 part-time people right now, 2 people for a few hours each week? Or do I hire one of these set of tasks first? And then once I get that stabilized, hire for this other set of tasks.
Absolutely. We have an episode I just did called the 4 Ds. We'll link out to it. And one of the Ds is obviously delegate. It's a way to go through your task list. But I said it in that episode, similar to you, is that even if you don't have a team or you don't have the person identified, if you can honestly answer, should this be delegated, while you're filtering through your task list and prioritizing, you're creating that list as well. Right? You can put a D next to it and you still do it because there's nobody else. But that D can then be documented as, look at all these things. Because what I have found is that if you don't have someone, then you don't even ask yourself if it can be delegated. You just do it, right? It just ends up on your list. And I want to encourage to keep looking through that lens so that you can see that opportunity of a possible position that can take stuff off your plate.
Yes. Sure. Yeah, I think that's important. I actually just shared with my email list this week as we're going to record 3 reasons why I didn't delegate a task that I hated. And it was in a workflow for my business, actually for my podcast. And I delegated 95% of the work of that specific workflow, but 5% I had to keep. And it was like these reasons why I had to keep them at that point in time when I was initially delegating. And one was budget. My budget was only so big for delegation. So I said, I can't afford everything. What is most important to get off my plates? The other one was return on the investment. It was like, once again, when I was kind of looking at that budget, not only like what I needed to get off my plate first, what I could afford, what was going to give me the best ROI. So what was going to move the needle the most in my company? And the other one was, I just wasn't ready to delegate those tasks because I wasn't ready to give up control of those items.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, eventually, I'll be able to give up control of those items. But right now, I'm more comfortable keeping those things on my plate. Even though I hate them, I'm more comfortable keeping them on my plate, but I get rid of 95% of the rest of the work. And now I'm to a point where I am getting ready to delegate more of those items in that particular workflow because now I can afford it. Because of the way my business and my podcast is going, the ROI is higher delegating those items, and I just feel comfortable doing it.
So it's a process, right? It's not like you just decide one day you're ready to hire and offload everything. In the 4 Ds that I was talking about, delegate. So one reason you wouldn't put a D next to something is because you don't have somebody. The other reason is because you have somebody, but you don't trust them because of whatever reason. They're not the right fit. They're not trained enough. And so this is the other reason why you'd find yourself at this crossroads of hiring. And oftentimes business owners will start taking stuff back because that feels easier than the idea of letting somebody go and go through the whole hiring process again, which we can laugh at, but it happens all the time. And there's so much resistance to hiring. So once we get past, what's the next thing? So like we have somebody in this role, so we know what the role is, right? And so what might be the next challenge and reason why somebody would be hesitant to do a hire? What skill set do you think that they're lacking or support they're lacking to be able to make that next hire?
Yeah. So part of it is a lot of people just really don't understand the hiring process. They either haven't done it. And that was one thing when I went out and did that research, most people had never hired before doing it with their own business. So it's like, you don't know what you don't know. You don't know how to be successful in the process because you've never done it before. And then there was a lot of people that hired while they worked for someone else, but they had everything pretty much handed to them. Here are the questions to ask. Here's the job posting. That's our corporate posting we're going to put up. Here's someone who's going to do your first round interview. So you just have to show up, do this last interview and make a decision.
Here's the personality test. They have to score this or they're not even a candidate. So you don't have to think about anything. right?
Yeah. So it's like all those things that then you're on your own and you're like, what do I do? Like, I didn't realize that there was all these steps going on behind the scenes that I was never brought into. So when you don't know what you don't know, it gives you a lot of opportunity to screw up. A lot of people will ask the wrong questions during an interview because they don't know why a question is a good question. And they just go out to Google and it's, what questions should I ask when I'm hiring for this position? And I can tell you, if you're Googling that, probably most of the results that you're going to get are not good results. They're going to give you such generic questions. And those questions might not have anything to do with you and your company and how that position is going to perform inside your organization. So it's just one of those things, like, people just don't have the skills, and they don't know that they don't have the skills at first, because they're always like, this is a piece of cake. I just got to talk to someone and I'm going to find someone that I like and I'm going to hire them and it's going to go so quickly. And it doesn't.
Yeah. So on both sides of your comment of you don't know what you don't know, I feel like that's true for the candidate. So you say, are you proficient at XYZ? They're like, yes, totally. But they're grading themselves through a lens of they don't know what they don't know. So no way are they an A, or, yes, I know that program 95%. You don't. So how do you test for that? Like how does the business owner feel confident in asking these questions? Because they're very subjective. The person's going to answer to their favor, and then you as the business owner either trust it or what? What's the alternative?
Yes. Yeah. It's like one of those things. If you ask someone, do you have high attention to detail? Their answer is going to be 100%. Yes. Like, I have high attention to detail. Well, that tells you absolutely nothing. Because like you said, it's just them saying that they do, because hardly anyone's going to say, no, I don't have attention to
Actually,
detail.
everything falls through the cracks, but please hire me.
Right? So it's about asking questions that really fall more into what we call the behavioral interview questions. So these are questions that really dive into specific examples from their work experience. So one of the things we ask around the attention to detail is we say, tell us about a specific task that you've had to complete in the past that has required a high attention to detail. So it's not just, do you have it? It's, prove to me that you have it, because you're going to share with me something that actually required it. And then based on what they share, you can ask some follow-up questions, like, walk me through your process for checking your work. So if they're in a data entry role, how did they go about checking their work? Sometimes a red flag is, well, my team member always checked my work. So were they not responsible for checking and confirming their own work before going through? And sometimes there's companies that have these checks and balances set up where, yes, a team member was required to check the work, no matter if it was 100% or not. But based on what they say and how they say it, you can dive in to say, do they really pay attention to their own work? Have they been involved in something that actually requires high attention to detail? Or do they just assume that they have attention to detail?
Right. Okay. So behavioral. And so then you're hearing the story. Then as a business owner, how do you keep the feelings out of it? Right. Like, you're like, oh, I liked her answer, or, oh, that was a great story. As a business owner, you want to like who you work with. And I feel like that filter can sometimes taint that interviewing experience quite a bit.
Yep.
So what are some strategies and tips you have for that?
Yeah. So first off, we always say, yes, personality fit is important, especially in small businesses. You're working very closely with that person. So you have to get along with that person. So I'm not saying don't factor in personality, but it needs to come second. That connection needs to come second. It's the skills that come first, and then use that connection to decide between candidates. Obviously, if you get on a first interview with someone and you're like, oh my gosh, I could never stand to be in the room with this person, I'm not saying move them on to the second interview. I'm saying when it comes to who you're actually going to extend that offer to, always make sure they can do the job first, and then measure, do I want to work with this person, as the second thing. Still important, but as the second thing. The way we teach our clients to go about doing that is know why you're asking every question that you're asking. What are you looking for? What is important about this role? So we always develop what we have is must-have criteria and nice-to-have criteria. We know that must-have criteria, they are deal breakers. If someone doesn't have this, they're not the right fit. Our nice-to-have criteria are those things that push that candidate over the top. We might be a little bit flexible here. If someone doesn't have it, they might come across strong in other things, we're willing to be flexible. Once you have that criteria and you know why you're asking each question, you can look at their answer to say, did they tell me what I needed to hear, or was it just a good answer? So a lot of times when we develop interview guides for our clients, we include, if it's not an obvious question, we include why. Why are we asking this question? So we can say, we are asking this question because, for example, high attention to detail is important for this role. It's important for this role because this person is responsible for entering financial information for your clients, and one missed number could result in big issues for your business.
Right.
So we'll include that why. So when they go back to look at it to say, all right, this is why this is a good answer. And this is why, even though that sounded good, they're not the right fit.
Okay. So now we're talking about specific skills, but what about like soft skills of like, oh, I don't know, connecting dots, figuring it out, follow through, right? Self-accountability. These are the things that small business owners I hear are crying for. Like, they're like, why? Like, are you serious? They're calling out again. Are you serious? Like, what all these things that are 100% related to the job, but are not in the job description, right? Like, how do you find out who that person is in an interview on the soft skill side?
Yeah. So there's some of it is, it's a game of playing detective. It's a game of connecting the dots on your side. It is, sometimes we ask questions that, not that we're making the candidate repeat itself, but they're kind of all circling around the same subject.
Mm-hmm.
Is a candidate just telling us what they think we want to hear, or are they actually telling us who they are? Because we're pulling the thread through those questions and through the answers to say, all right, they claim this in this answer, but did it also show up in the example they gave for this answer? And so some of those things we're playing detective. We're diving into their answers to kind of say, how do these things connect in the background? Also, for some of the things we look at, how does the candidate present themselves during the interview? And I'm not talking about physical appearance. I'm talking about, this is an example for something that just happened. We're looking for someone who's going to be on top of this business owner's schedule, helping to schedule appointments, making sure there's no conflicts, high attention to detail. And we were recruiting for this client. So we were doing the first round interviews. A candidate went in and scheduled 2 interviews. And I just said, when the second interview came through, I was like, all right, did they mean to reschedule and just click to schedule a new one instead of rescheduling and forget to tell us that they needed to cancel and move their first interview? Or did they not realize that they already scheduled an interview and now scheduled a second interview because they're not on top of things on their side?
This is great.
So I reached out to the candidate just to kind of clarify, and they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize I had already scheduled an interview. Can we keep the second time?
And you're thinking, nope, not either.
And so I was just like, all right, this is a sign that this person is not right. Where there might be other positions where I'm willing to forgive that because those skills are not something that we're measuring. So it's kind of looking at the whole entire process. How do they communicate? How do they show up? What are they giving you? Another example is I occasionally help some law firms with hiring. And so like the way the candidates talk to me during the interview, because I'm not a lawyer, I will then say, how are they going to talk to clients? Because clients are not a lawyer as well. So sometimes they come off as, if they're coming off as very arrogant, and for arrogant lawyers do not work in this law firm. They work well in some law firms, but not in this law firm. I'm just like, they might not be the right person. If we walk out of that interview and I'm just like, I think I know, like I could go and give these answers and I don't even work in the industry. Then I was like, did they really do a good job explaining why did they deserve to be in this position, that they have the knowledge and skill? So sometimes it is playing that detective, seeing how they show up, how do they answer the questions, not just what they say, but how they go about answering it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So I often give my clients the advice of hire before you are needing it, meaning i.e. desperate, because desperate is going to affect how you hear the interview process. You're going to be like, oh, they're great, but they were just like a little good because you're in like dire need of either filling a new role or replacing a role. And so if at all chances you can be like, ahead of the game where you're like, I'm going to stick this out for the best candidate. I don't feel desperate right now. Would you, I mean, do you see this too as like, they're like just eager to make the first hire because they're in desperate need?
Yes. Yeah. I see a lot of people say, I'm going to hire this person because they're the best of what I have. Well, the best of a bad pool of candidates is not going to be a good hire. And then I also hear people say on like the flip side of, I love this candidate. They are perfect, but I need to speak to more people because I need to interview X amount of people before I make a decision.
Oh, good.
And I always say, you don't need to interview a certain number of people. Either someone is good or bad all on their own. The only time we should be comparing candidates is when there's two candidates that are both qualified for the job. We like them both. And now we're trying to decide which of these great candidates we actually make the offer to. So I see a lot of times people rush because they just need somebody on their team. They're desperate.
Big mistake.
And as you said, you should hire before you're really in that desperation point. I will just give you a little heads up of what, if you've never hired before, what you can expect. To find a great hire takes on average 6 to 8 weeks from when you start the process to when that person starts. And I know a lot of people say that they're like, oh my gosh, that is so long. And I'm saying when you start the process. So that includes going and writing your job posting, getting that job posting up and running, collecting the candidates that come through, reviewing every resume that comes through, scheduling your first round interviews, which you're busy and that's why you're typically hiring. So you need to find time for these first round interviews, make your decision on who's moving on to the second round interviews, scheduling your second round interviews. And yes, you need to have 2 rounds of interviews before you make your decision. And we can talk about that in a minute of why that's so important. Then after you do those second round interviews, depending on what you're hiring for, you might have some sort of case study or testing or something that candidate needs to go through before you make your decision. You need to make your decision. You need to make an offer to a candidate. And then typically candidates have to give at least 2 weeks notice before they can come and join your team. So all these steps take time and you need to make sure that you're ready for that time. If you needed someone yesterday, and someone tells you it's going to take up to 8 weeks to have someone join your team, you're going to sit there and say, oh my goodness, I'm already drowning. How am I going to survive the next 8 weeks while going through the hiring process and still doing all the work that's already making me drowning? So that's one of the reasons why you have to be very proactive when it comes to hiring. And we're not talking about hiring before the need ever exists, but hiring once the need starts to present itself.
Okay. What is your take on the current job market? It ebb and flows year to year. Sometimes it's like everyone's looking for a job, and other times it's like nobody is applying. What's going on in your experience right now? And do you see that shifting anytime soon?
Yes. So I think right now in most industries, you're getting a good batch of candidates. There are some industries where I felt like things were a little tough earlier this year. So as we're recording this, we're in September of 2023. Things are really starting, I think, to have a good positive outlook with the economy. But there was earlier this year where there was constant talk of there possibly being a recession. So candidates that were in an industry where they felt like if a recession happens, this is the first industry that's going to feel a hit. We're less likely to leave a job to go to something new because if a recession hits, typically it's last in, first out. Mm-hmm. So in some industries, it was a little tougher to find candidates willing to leave their current job to go to a new job. Other industries, candidates are moving all the time. I feel like compared to a year and a half ago, where you had to offer these huge salary increases for people to move, things have stabilized a lot more there. And people are now going back to making job moves because they're just ready to make a job move and not for necessarily these ridiculous pay increases that were happening a year and a half ago. Obviously, you have to pay your employees fairly and everything like that, but it's not as competitive there. So I think things are stabilizing a little bit, but I will say it's still a candidate market. And what I mean by that is candidates have a lot of choice of when it comes to applying for openings. They are going to look critically at those jobs to decide which job they should even apply for. And then they're going to be critical themselves throughout that entire hiring process to make sure that they get into an opportunity that is going to suit them for whatever their needs are. So candidates are not just saying yes to anything. They want that job that's going to fit their needs. So they're really looking at every step of the process to evaluate the company just as much as you're evaluating the candidates.
Yeah. So what are they looking for outside of salary that's important to them right now?
One of the biggest things is flexibility. I will say about 2 years ago, if you weren't hiring 100% remote jobs, good luck hiring. If you wanted someone to be in the office, good luck. But one of the things that I've seen a lot now is people either want to go back to the office because maybe they live by themselves and they're like, being home 24/7 by myself, even if I have coworkers to talk to is a little too much. So I want that office feel, or they want something that's flexible. People, less and less people are looking for 100% remote jobs. And a lot of them are looking for hybrid with flexibility. So if they want to travel someplace, let's say they're traveling for the Thanksgiving holiday, instead of having to take vacation that entire week, they can work remotely Monday through Wednesday, have the holiday off. They're looking for things like that, flexibility where flexibility can be had, but still that ability to have those office connections.
Yeah. How do you find out what's important to the candidate to speak to that? Like to put the employer, the business in a good light?
Yeah. So sometimes it's just being direct. So one of the clients that I've recently been helping with, they are in an industry where it's like when you walk in that door to when you leave, you hit the ground running and you don't stop. So we talk about that during the interview process. We want to make sure candidates are okay with that. So we directly ask, they're like, the hours for this job are this to this. A lot of team members don't necessarily break for lunch because there's just a lot of work to get done and they prefer just to move on through. If that's an environment that is going to stress you out, this isn't the right place for you. Do you feel comfortable with that? But then we'll also ask some other questions. We ask questions of, would you prefer to work in an environment where things are always in chaos or where things never change, and why? Once again, it's kind of that why we're really looking for. A lot of them will say, well, think you're leaning for one thing. Typically, they think you're leaning towards chaos because, things are always changing in small businesses, but it's the why. Why are they telling us this? One of the questions we also almost always ask is, why are you looking for a new opportunity? And what we're trying to uncover here is the reason they're leaving their job going to also happen within this business? So if they're leaving their job because there's no room for growth and opportunity, and they're coming into a small business where there's not that existing ladder for them to climb in their career, are they going to quickly leave here too? So that's a follow-up question. What does growth and opportunity look like for you? This is a small business where opportunities might come, but there's not necessarily that path for promotion that exists today. And kind of talking about, do they understand that? Do they like that? Are they okay with it?
I love those questions. Where are you finding that the best candidates are applying from? So, as a small business owner, you hear, all right, write a great job description, get clear on who you want, and then go post it. So the go post it, is there a popular place, a place that's getting higher quality candidates than others in your experience? Where should business owners be looking?
Yeah, so we always post jobs on Indeed and tell our clients to post jobs on Indeed. We find it to be one of the most successful platforms when it comes to hiring. And Indeed gives you the option to post for free or to pay to sponsor your post. We always say post for free at first, find out what's going on. Posting for free, it will get in front of eyes at first so you can see, all right, this job description makes sense to me, but now that it's in front of other eyes where they don't understand what I mean by these words, they're interpreting it differently. Am I connecting to the right people? So you can kind of test things out there. Outside of Indeed, it's really going to depend on the position. There are some positions that work really well on LinkedIn. There are other positions where your job's not going to get looked at twice on LinkedIn.
Mm.
And even when you're in these like professional fields, like you're highly professional fields where you're like, these people should be on LinkedIn all the time. Just with the job board algorithms and who's looking there, they don't necessarily apply to those openings. Outside of that, we do a lot of looking into niche sites for industries. Depending on the position is going to make a big difference on will these jobs do well on these niche sites. So for example, we work a lot of clients in the interior design fields, and some of our clients with the certain positions, they'll post on niche sites and they'll do fantastic. There's other ones we look at and say, your job is not going to stand out here. Your ideal candidate, because of the combination of tasks and responsibilities, they're not here. This is not going to do well. Don't waste your money to post on this niche site that's pay to play.
Okay, excellent. And then what are your thoughts about reactively just waiting for people to apply and then proactively going out and looking for candidates and asking them to apply?
Yeah, so we actually do very little headhunting. So going out and asking candidates to apply for the openings that we help with. One, because we think the active job market produces better candidates than the passive job market. So passive meaning they're not looking for opportunities, but if an opportunity falls in their lap, they'll consider it. And the reason why we say that is typically we work with small businesses. So you don't have these huge budgets and these crazy perks that you can go in, supply to someone that's going to entice them to leave a job to come to you. Also, if a candidate's going to be swayed because someone reaches out to them to come to you, guess what? They're highly likely to be swayed to go to that next opportunity that they're headhunted for. So we find that we have much better results when we go to the active job market. Now, there are times with certain positions in certain industries that you need to do a little bit of headhunting and reaching out if your position's not getting a number of candidates. And sometimes it's really surprising of the industry. So we worked with a company that did like prints on demand services. And they were hiring someone to really work with their printers. And this specific position, I would say if you had to define it, it would probably fall more on the blue collar spectrum of roles within a company and in these print shops and everything. And we actually had a lot of success headhunting on LinkedIn. And these are typically people that I would say, are they even on LinkedIn? Like, they don't network for their jobs and things like that. But we had success headhunting on LinkedIn. And I think part of the reason we had success is there are probably people that don't get headhunted a lot on LinkedIn. So they're not getting messages all the time. So when we sent them a message, it was, hey, what is this? This is something new. So we stood out versus like the candidates that are great people on LinkedIn and they get messages all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. I would love to just pivot as we close up and talk about the services you offer as a resource, because I believe that business owners can learn any skill set, but not always is it their best use of their time, most productive to learn this skill set, perhaps, when we can ask for help and get outside consultation. So obviously you started this business to solve a major pain point. We're in agreement what the pain point is. What specifically do you offer to help with these pain points?
Yes. Yeah, I can definitely share that. Before I get into that, I know at one point I mentioned, we'd get to possibly why you should be doing 2 interviews instead of just one and making a decision. So let's make sure we cover that first. And part of that will kind of go in and you'll see how some of our services fit this process. With 2 interviews, you're going to ask different questions and you're going to dive deeper into the candidates in that second interview. It has happened when I've hired for growing your team. It's happened for my clients. That there is a candidate after that first interview that you say, this is it. This is the person I'm going to hire. And 5 minutes into that second interview, because you're looking at different things, you say, nope, they're not a fit. Yes, they were a fit in category A, but now that we're looking at questions in category B, they don't work. People are going to show up differently for that second interview because they're getting a little bit more comfortable. So always do 2 interviews because you're really going to uncover everything you need to know about that candidate. And you also then don't have to have a super long first interview for candidates you're going to be able to tell within 10 minutes, no, they're just not right for this position. So that's part of the reason why I always do 2 interviews. So with our services, we offer 3 main services. We start out every package with what we call our hiring kickoff call, where we walk our clients through a series of questions to really identify who is your ideal candidate. What does that person look like? What tasks are they going to do? What does it mean to be successful in this role? If you tell me I need someone who's a strong communicator, okay, what does that mean for your company? How do we measure if someone's a strong communicator? Is it all email? Is it over the phone? Is it face-to-face with clients? Is it with vendors? So we really dive into what are these tasks that they're doing? What are these responsibilities that they have? What skill sets they need? And why are they important? From there, we create what we call the hiring strategy. This looks a little bit different based on our packages, but the hiring strategy at its basic part is a job posting that's going to speak directly to that ideal candidate. We want someone to read that job posting and say, they described me. This is 100% me. This is my role. And when we've interviewed candidates, like we've actually had candidates say that to us, that they applied because they read that and this job posting described them to a T. So we create a job posting that will speak to that ideal candidate, because it's okay to turn people off from your job posting. If they're not right,
it's like time saver, right?
Yeah. So we create that job posting, and then we create at least 2 interview guides. So a quick first, what we call our phone screen, to get some basic questions out of the way, have that first conversation with the candidate, and then a more in-depth second interview. Our packages then differ based on our most basic one. We create that for you. We hand it off for you. We have a call where we answer some questions. You execute it 100% on your own. So you just need the tools to hire well. Our next package up from there is what we call our guidance and education package. It's our one-on-one consulting. So we create everything for you. You execute it, but we're there holding your hand every step of the way. We're giving you the encouragement you need. We're helping you overcome the mindset roadblocks that come up. We're helping you make decisions. We're teaching you how to conduct a successful interview. We're teaching you things like, how do you exit an interview early if you really hate a candidate and you know that you don't want to hire them?
I love it.
You want to be respectful. We're helping you evaluate to say, yes, this person should move forward, or no, this person shouldn't. So you don't get stuck in that. It sounded good, so I'm going to move them forward when they're really not a fit. So we consult with you. We help you along the way. And then our top tier package is our full service recruiting. So myself and my team, we post the job. We review every applicant that comes in. If some light headhunting is needed, we take care of that. We complete all the first round interviews. We provide you the top candidates that are worthy of your time for that last round interview. And we handle all the candidate communication except making the offer, because we feel that they're not working for us, they're working for you. So you should make the offer, but we'll help out with that conversation if and when needed, and we'll make sure you're prepared for that conversation.
Excellent. And then you also have a podcast. So just let our listeners know where they can find you, your website and your podcast.
Yeah. So my podcast is the Growing Your Team podcast. It's available on all major podcasting platforms or over at growingyourteam.com/podcast. And we talk about all things teams. A lot of it's around hiring, but we also talk about how to manage your team successfully, onboarding your team, growing your leadership skills, how to prepare for a team. So we talked about a lot of times as small businesses, we're in that moment of chaos where there's so much going on. So how do you really become successful and set up things so when you bring that team member on, you can then make things flow as best as you can. And Amber, you were just on the podcast as we're going to record this. So episode 194, go listen to that and you can hear another conversation that we had.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here today. This was a great conversation. I think it's going to be incredibly helpful. So thanks for being here.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me.
I have loved having you listen to this episode of Productivity Straight Talk. And I sure hope you enjoyed my conversation with Jamie today about the hiring process. But I need to be straight with you. No change, no change. Without taking action, nothing will change for you or your business. So based on today's conversation, what I would like you to do is just identify one area of the hiring process that you can improve upon. And that might look like getting some help, hiring it out, outsourcing, or learning how to interview better so that you're walking into those interviews more confident, that you're able to make the decisive decision of who would be best to be on your team. It doesn't need to look like you're overhauling the entire hiring process today. This is something that will never change as long as you're a business owner. You will have the need to hire. So start working with one small step forward in improving your hiring process today. And if you have not already done so, hit pause right now and head on over to amberdelagarza.com/quiz to take my next level business owner quiz. Again, you can head on over to amberdelagarza.com/quiz to get your curated playlist today. And if you're new here, welcome. Thank you so much. Be sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss another episode. And if you've enjoyed today's episode, please share it with another business owner so that they can find value from this conversation with Jamie. It's a gift of sharing productivity straight talk. So that's my straight talk for today. Until next time, have a productive week.